Welcome to Tech Intersect. I'm your host, Tanya Evans, and my life and work exist at the heart of law, business, and technology. Yeah, I've earned a few fancy titles and degrees over the years, but the bottom line is I'm a writer, speaker, teacher, and lifelong learner, and I'm really excited that you've joined me on this journey. So what is Tech Intersect? Well, it's authentic, empowering conversations with really interesting guests who demystify complex topics to prepare you for the future. Because your future is now. And it exists where law, business, and tech intersect. Get ready to listen, learn, and leverage. Let's get started. In this episode of Tech Intersect, I welcome Mikel Owunna, a multimedia artist, engineer, and emerging NFT artist based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He centers himself as a queer Nigerian-Swedish American who explores the intersections of visual media with engineering, optics, Blackness, and African cosmologies. And his work seeks to elucidate an emancipatory vision of possibility that pushes Black people beyond all boundaries, restrictions, and frontiers. His work has been exhibited across Asia, Europe, and North America, and been collected by institutions like the National Museum of Art, Museum of Fine Arts, Houston, Equal Justice Initiative, Duke University Pratt School of Engineering, and the National Taiwan Museum. His work has also been featured in the New York Times and on CNN, NPR, in Vice, and The Guardian. He has lectured at internationally renowned venues like Harvard Law School, the World Press Photo in the Netherlands, Tate Modern, and TEDx. Mikel's first published monograph, Limitless Africans, was released in 2019 by Photo Evidence, and he was awarded as a finalist for the Photo Evidence Book Award with World Press Photo. In this conversation, we explore opportunities for economic and artistic justice in the creative NFT space, commonalities and differences between the physical and digital art worlds, finding yourself in the midst of creative expression, and how true economic and artistic justice for people throughout the diaspora can only occur from all people participating as investors and collectors in addition to artists. Now, before we jump into the episode, please take a moment to follow this podcast and then like, share, and comment so that others who would benefit from this content can find it. Okay, it's time to listen, learn, and leverage. Let's get started. Today, I am so excited to speak with Mikael Owunna, a queer Nigerian-Swedish American multimedia artist, engineer, and NFT artist based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm from the Commonwealth myself, and so we can definitely talk about a Philly thing versus a Pittsburgh thing and everything that's happening in the middle where I live right now. So I love that part of your multi-intersection presence, and I love how you self-describe. We are exploring, and he is through his art, exploring the intersections of visual media with engineering, optics, Blackness, and African cosmologies. His work seeks to elucidate an emancipatory vision of possibility that pushes Black people beyond all boundaries, restrictions, and frontiers. Those topics are particularly important and possible in a Web 3.0 world as we think about the decentralization and the distributed impact of blockchain technology. We will talk about all of that in a moment, but first, Mikel, welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Evans. It's an honor and a pleasure to be in conversation with you.
I love it because you're also my Twitter best friend.
Yes.
In my head, no stalker vibes. I just want you to feel comfortable, remain comfortable. But it's you know,
shared.
it's yes, because we've used social media for good, and I've just had so many wonderful, authentic, very rich connections through social media, and we know that Twitter can be toxic. Any place in space can be toxic if you have toxic people. But what about the rest of us? The other 6 billion of us or so that might use our powers for good. So I'm so delighted that we have a chance to connect. We share so many things. So there's so much to talk about and to share with listeners. First, I want to introduce you, for those who don't know, to just talk about your artistic background, point of view, and what brought you to the space of NFTs. We'll get to that in a moment, but who are you?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I actually began my artistic practice while in engineering school. So at Duke University, I double majored in biomedical engineering and history. And at the same time, I was also struggling with my sexuality. And so I was
Mm-hmm.
really dealing with that interface between my queer identity and my African identity. And when I was a freshman in college, we went back to Nigeria for Christmas. And I was actually put through a series of ceremonies to drive the gay out of me while I was there.
Mm.
And so dealing with that fallout from that traumatic experience, I spent the next few months when I came back to the US spiraling into a lot of anxiety and depression. And at the end of my freshman year, I was scheduled to go to England to study for the summer. And one of my friends said to me, she's like, oh, we should get cameras before we go.
Mm.
And I didn't think it was going to be something big, but when I picked up the camera, I felt like I found my voice again. And so I
Mm.
started using photography for myself as a emotional outlet and a light for me at a moment when I felt really voiceless. And so I did photography all throughout college. At the end of college, I did a Fulbright scholarship in Taiwan where I taught photography to Taiwanese Aboriginal students. I
Mm.
returned from that experience, and then I actually worked on a documentary series for 6 years where I traveled to 10 countries and I documented 50 LGBT African immigrants, refugees, and asylum seekers in North America, Europe, and the Caribbean, working to
Mm.
debunk the myth that it's un-African to be LGBTQ. And so that's really what brought me into my artistic practice. And but it also was happening at the same time that I was in engineering school. And so
Interesting.
with my current body of work, which is the basis for all of my NFT work, I actually begin by a process of ultraviolet photography where I actually hand paint all of my models' bodies with fluorescent paints. And then I
Mm.
hand built my own flash that only transmits ultraviolet light, which then in total darkness, I'm able to then illuminate the model's bodies and create these cosmic patterns, kind of transfiguring Black bodies from these sites of death and state violence and all these violent imagery we see in terms of police violence against Black bodies, Michael Brown, George Floyd, Philando Castile, transfiguring Black bodies into these cosmic vessels that are connected to our African origin stories of creation. So it's kind of this longer arc that ended up now seeing really clearly the connection to my engineering background in the current work that was there at the same time at the genesis of my artistic practice.
I think that is so beautiful. The cathartic experience of art, but also leveraging your existing skills and affinity in the tech space without knowing that we were going to have the option of non-fungible tokens in order to enter this whole new world to amplify the excellence in the creative and the science and to bring yourself to the fore as a Black queer man. And what that means for people throughout the diaspora means that because you exist and because you are highlighting and using yourself really as a guidepost, really a North Star for others who might be able to find their way, and to do it with a technology that reaches beyond borders. It's really, really powerful. And so we have the border within, as a Black queer woman with my own experience through the world and leveraging other things to become more fully myself too. But what that means for others and through the medium of being able to reach forward is really, really powerful. In what ways can you see the transformative power of a borderless society that helps people come into their own through art?
So, I mean, I think for me, it's really connected to a lot of the artistic influences that inform my work. I mean, a lot of the artists that have inspired me have been like a large number of African American artists. Thinking about James Van Der Zee, John Biggers,
Mm-hmm.
Aaron Douglas, Hale Woodruff. I mean, there's like this whole cadre of African American artists. Also looking across the diaspora at African artists and photographers such as Nellie Maholi, Seydou Keita, Malik Sidibe. And so there's really been this creatively, there's always been this movement, particularly thinking about how Black artists have generated work, specifically also kind of engaging with across the diaspora, all of us kind of engaging with like African American, Black American artistic traditions that have really inspired the entire world. And so there's always this movement that we're seeing across borders. And so I think as we're talking about in terms of the technology, I think it's more so an extension of what's already been going on in terms of the way in which specifically, particularly like African American and Black American artistic traditions have been influencing global conversations of artistic production for centuries. So now we see like, you know, this idea of it being borderless is that, you know, now people are literally transacting in that way, but the way in which culture production was already moving was already, I think, very much within that modality.
That's really interesting too, because, you know, we were talking before the show about the economic empowerment that is happening for folks around the globe, particularly when I think of on the continent, various countries in particular. Nigeria immediately comes to mind as the number one country on the continent actively using, I think, Bitcoin in particular, but crypto in general, which is interesting. And then to also transition to the artistic side, where there are artists throughout the diaspora who now have an opportunity on a peer-to-peer basis because of the technology with blockchain to have a direct connection, no longer having to rely on galleries that may have traditionally or historically excluded, no longer have to rely on large auction houses that undervalue our work or serve as a gatekeeper for what they consider to be fine art or art worthy of having, even though we know there's quite a bit of art pilfering around the world. Every time I think about, you know, a museum, it's like, I wonder where they got that from. And is there licensing going back? And where's the money, right? So that's a story for another day. Well, maybe you have a commentary on that as well. But what your thoughts are about what the opportunities for artists are now, given all of that.
So it's really interesting. And I think so coming from the traditional art space, you know, we're having worked with museums, having worked with galleries, and also being within these conversations and with non-fungible tokens and crypto art. I think I can see the different sides of both coins. And I think that the conversation is actually more complicated within crypto art than I think people typically say in terms of the opportunities. So when I say that, I mean that, for example, in the traditional art market, the gatekeepers are the galleries, right? And the museums. And we know that the galleries and museums are basically completely white dominated. And so Black artists have been excluded from those conversations, period, for centuries and decades. Really was catalyzed by African American artists in the 60s with the Black arts movement, pushing and protesting outside of museums like the Met and MoMA, bringing attention to the fact that their collections did not include Black artists. And so that's now opened up spaces for more Black curators, et cetera. But still, it's very, very white, very few Black artists in collections and physical spaces, same gatekeepers, white gatekeepers.
Right.
Within crypto art, what I've noticed is that who the gatekeepers are different. So yes, we are all on Twitter, we're all online, we're on Clubhouse, people are on Discord, able to then share their art from different parts of the globe, etc. One of the big differences, though, is like that who can actually buy the work. So it's like the people who actually have all of the cryptocurrencies are particularly white and largely white and Asian tech investors who invested heavily in crypto years ago. So they have these large wallets. And so in terms of who actually was trying to speak to, who could actually purchase the work, the gatekeeping does not necessarily include Black people in large numbers. And so we're still, I think, one of the pieces that's different is that being actually able to display your work you're much more accessible to display your work within the crypto space. I think in terms of, though, still the people who actually buy the work, who has to resonate with, are maybe not the same people in the fine art world, but maybe they're like their cousin or somebody. You know, so
their nephew, right?
Their nephew. So I say that all to say is that, you know, I feel like it's more complicated in terms of, I think there are big opportunities because of particularly the way in which blockchain encodes ownership and royalty rights to artists. I think there are big opportunities in the way in which, as you said, it's borderless in the way in which people can transact across borders. For artists all across the world can share their work online. But who actually has access to actually increase the floor of their prices? Who actually is the one who is driving the market decisions? It's kind of similar in many ways. And so I think we actually, as Black artists, I think for me, one of the pieces that I've always kind of been thinking about is like about, I think because I've seen it so much in the fine art world and I come into the NFT space, I can also notice it. And
Right.
I think also part of many of the other artists in the NFT space, many people are really young artists and maybe have not kind of picked up on what's going on. But
Mm-hmm.
I think what happens that always it's like, okay, a few Black people get ascended, but we don't realize what the larger power structure is going on around us. So that's just
Mm,
a few of my thoughts of like what's going on. And I feel like because again, Black people were shut out of that early investment in crypto, the
right.
people who can then drive the market are not. When I'm making stories about African cosmologies, the people who might resonate with that work and purchase it might not be the people who actually have the cryptocurrency or not Ethereum to actually purchase it. So I think that's
Right.
the complication that comes in.
You love listening to podcasts, but have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? Maybe you want to build a brand, grow your business, or are looking for an excuse to talk about your favorite hobby. Whatever your reason for making a podcast, Buzzsprout is the place to start. Since 2009, Buzzsprout has helped over 300,000 people launch their own podcasts. Buzzsprout walks you step by step through the whole process and will give you powerful tools to start, grow, and monetize your podcast. Ready to get started? Click the link in the show notes to get our free step-by-step guide to starting your podcast today.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of Tech Intersect. Our conversation will continue in a moment, but first, a word on an exciting opportunity.
There's a more cost-effective and time-efficient way to reach your leading-edge learning and earning goals, to put you ahead of the stiff competition in this fast-paced, tech-driven economy. You need skills, credentials, and a fast track to a competitive advantage. You need it now more than ever, and I can help. The Advantage Evans method puts you ahead of the curve with condensed, comprehensive online courses, curated content to leverage your current skills and expertise, live coaching, networking opportunities, and more. Upcoming courses include From Cash to Crypto to help you buy your first Bitcoin, and there are 2 ways to get your advantage. Advantage Evans Encore gives you maximum experience for your total competitive advantage and access for 1 year. It includes a live welcome and modules on terminology, buying and selling, exchanges, mining, earning crypto, trading and investing, and also several of the legal issues you need to know in order to be safe and secure as you enter this space. That includes tax compliance, how to plan for a Bitcoin estate, and securities laws to make sure you avoid any legal unforced errors. Now, Advantage Core gives you the essentials. It's a short course to give you what you want and the support you need to buy your first crypto in as little as 3 weeks, with access to the information and replays for 3 months. And if you're not quite ready for your Advantage and want a sneak peek to try before you buy, then register for a free masterclass where I share my Crypto 101 success checklist and cover current hot topics in crypto. So there truly is something for everyone, including you, to get in on the fast track and learn and earn in the digital economy. Visit AdvantageEvans.com to get started. That's AdvantageEvans.com.
And now, back to the conversation.
You raised some really important points, and 2 things emerge of particular import. One, on the side of those who are positioned economically to participate, right? So we have, new level, new devil. We have the idea of the disintermediation on one hand, but the reemergence of some of the same systemic issues that are not, as far as I can tell in this moment, set up specifically to disenfranchise, but the de facto impact, right? If it may not be your intention, but if that is the impact, then where are we? Maybe an additional point to that is we have other tools, systems, and mechanisms perhaps to remedy that in a way that in a Web 2.0 world is really, really challenging to do. But the point is not lost on me. And I don't think I've spent enough time thinking about and talking about who has access to the crypto to be able to participate meaningfully in this new space, right? And so maybe the result of that, it may be twofold. One, we see more, I'd love your opinion about this. Do we see more investors than collectors? I've had this whole conversation around the folks who are participating. And so I can imagine, an investor is going to come in on spec and maybe, they're going to buy something low and sell it high. They're using the same ideology coming from the finance space here as just a speculative investment because I'm a whale and just have so much crypto to throw around that let me buy, dabble in these areas versus the collector who sees the subjective value in just collecting this piece of art, connecting with a work or an artist. And maybe that changes the dynamic as more investor than curator or collector. Your thoughts?
Yeah. So I think, again, that's one of the things that's also really familiar with the fine art space, because within the fine art space, there is so much, particularly in the physical art market, particularly with Black figurative painting, but also Black abstraction now and paintings in general. There's so much speculation on Black art and Black artists. And so you see some artists being purchased for like $10,000 for a painting, and then people are flipping it for like 70,000 2 years later. And so I think that's a similar mindset that we see across the board. So I don't think that's something that's necessarily unique to crypto. I think it's the way in which Western cultures conceptualize of art as an asset, period. That is something that is traded, that then used to gain value. It's really, I think from that perspective, in terms of like collecting work or engaging with artwork is within our cultural context, it is so like removed from how it was kind of in a pre-colonial African context, where these were like spiritual objects that were used to elevate our collective consciousness, right? And so the way in which art is conceptualized, I think just within Western framework, just begets these ways in which people end up coming in from an quote unquote investor mindset and speculative mindset across the board. So I don't think that's something that's necessarily unique. Right. I think it's a symptom of a larger culture.
Do you think this also has an impact on the artist who sees, more than a few people, particularly Black artists, selling works? I think of Andre O'Shea and Corey Van Loo, certainly Micah Johnson, Latasha, and there's so many. Lizzie. There's so many. I can continue to go on and say, well, I want to make some money as well, and so I'm going to create art. And I'm a poet by not training, but by birth, and so I wear both I'm right-brained and left-brained, and I have a great deal of respect for artistry. I know that when I am writing or was writing and performing as a performance poet, I didn't think about the financial aspect of it. It was something that I was giving birth to, but it wasn't mine to keep. As a matter of art, that it was my intention that I needed to share. Now I do live in America, and the capitalist side of me, I don't love this idea or trope of the starving artist and feel like it could be a both and. Can I perform? Can I share my gift and keep the lights on? And it's a long way around saying, do you find that there are artists, particularly younger artists, that are focused more on the economics than the artistry, and what your thoughts might be about that?
I think one of the things that's so interesting in the NFT space versus in the fine art space is that people know what people are selling for, and they know how much people are making.
That
in the
part.
Fine art space, nobody knows. Like the thing is that, my prices for my work were only just published publicly because I started working with a gallery to sell my physical works, and it was just published like a month ago, and I've been doing it for years. So there's so much kind of this shadowy nature where nobody knows actually like how much are you selling for, how do you sell. And so then also within fine arts, quote unquote fine art spaces, or traditional quote unquote traditional physical art spaces, there's almost shame in talking about money and making money from work.
Interesting.
Like there's a shame that people have about it, or people will be like, oh no, I should not be able to make any money because of X, Y, and Z. It's about the art, it's about the creativity, da 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 da. So there's that extreme.
Right.
In the crypto space, everybody knows how much you made, when you made it, how it's gone up, and how it's changed. And I think
Right.
that's also one part that's also very interesting because everybody's constantly talking about how much they're making, how their prices are going, everything. And
Yes.
so it's very different culturally. And I think as you said, I think we could have both. I think we
Right.
could have both, right? Because I think that in one extreme or the other, we can sometimes lose our purpose for what we're doing.
Mm,
And so I think for me, one of the most important parts, I think for my journey period, was to know why I was making the work that I am.
right.
And for me, I have been making work because I'm striving to revive ancestral African cosmological traditions that connect us to our ancestral origins and the creation of the universe, this primordial androgynous blackness that creates all life. And
Beautiful.
so by reviving African myths, I'm stepping in the footsteps of my journey. I'm stepping in the footsteps that have been laid out for me by my ancestors. And so from that perspective, I know that prices will go up, prices will go down, these are things will happen, da 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 da. And so anytime things are happening, I need to just kind of always ground myself in that mission and
Right.
just keep going. I think from that perspective, of course, we need to be able to make money. We need to be able to sustain ourselves. It's very important. And through the accumulation of wealth, I'm able to further my journey and also help other artists and build teams that we can collectively uplift ourselves, you know? And so I think that's the perspective. I think as when people come in with a grounding about who they are as an artist and what their purpose is,
Mm-hmm.
the other pieces, you don't get as confused by the noise that's around you, because things become hot in a moment, things disappear, but at the end of the day, it's like, who are you? Are you as an artist, and why are you doing what you're doing? So I think that's a bit of my response to the dichotomy that you see between the two spaces.
I think that's going to be really helpful to a lot of artists. And it definitely was a clarifying point for me. So let's talk about your most recent drop. We've been here. Let's get super specific about the work that you recently released, which caught my attention and was the reason I definitely wanted to have you on to share your NFT journey and specifically what you're working on now in terms of that drop. And then what's next?
So I jumped into the NFT space pretty recently in June. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm like a baby in this space. So I think
Love it.
I've been spending a lot of time like on Twitter, on Clubhouse, like doing a lot of research. Even before getting into the space, I reached out to different artists, including like Federico Solmi, who's a friend of mine who's moved between physical spaces and NFT spaces. I also reached out to Andre O'Shea,
Mm-hmm.
Raven, 50 millimeter, to also get some advice before entering into the space. And so since June, I've released a 3-part series that explores the Dogon creation myth and creation story. And so the Dogon are a tribe or ethnic group in Mali and have a really sophisticated and developed cosmological system that include observations of celestial bodies such as Sirius B, which are only detectable with a telescope. And so using African divination, they've literally connected the blackness of their inner worlds with the blackness of outer space to remote view stars. And so I've spent like a long time, well over a year, doing a lot of research into French anthropological texts and the documentation of Dogon myth. And that's really been the basis of a lot of my photography and the meaning of the captions of my images. And one of the things that I personally got so excited about with the NFT space was that I was able to connect my research much more directly to the images through animation, because I'm able to also include pre-colonial Dogon writing systems into it. And so the symbols that are formed from my images turn into these pre-colonial African writing systems, these pre-colonial Dogon symbols that connect us to these different celestial bodies. And so the drop is like a 3-part series that begins with the Sirius B, which for the Dogon is the birth canal of the universe. You enter into Sirius B through that drop. And the second drop that came out was Amma's womb, which is like this primordial androgynous creator god that contains all genders, all sexualities, everything in one. And so you enter into Amma's womb in the second piece, and then the third piece that came out, I think like a week or two ago, the third piece is when Amma, this primordial androgynous creator god, opens their eyes. And when they open their eyes, the 266 signs that prefigure all creation spill forth from their womb and create the universe. And so again, it's kind of staging out the different stages of African creation stories as ways to connect us to this primordial androgynous blackness and source that transcends all life.
Wow, that's extraordinary. And are these one of ones, or are they limited editions? How have you minted these?
Yeah, so I've minted these each as one of ones, which also makes them distinct from my physical photography work, because my photography work are limited editions of like 6 or 3. And so these are the only one of ones in my artistic portfolio, is my NFT work.
Brilliant. And how did you go about marketing for this drop?
I, again, was working with like a number of friends. And so Federico, who I mentioned earlier, had been providing some advice for me. I also connected with the curator, Larry Ose-Mensah, who has also worked between digital spaces and physical spaces. And so we organized like a Clubhouse launch party. Larry also invited certain people he knew within the tech space as well. And so that was a way to also have an opportunity to introduce the work to prospective collectors. And through the Clubhouse, we then had like the first Genesis drop sold. And then that was a way that I was able to then kind of begin my journey. I also worked with the Black NFT community, the African NFT community, that have been so incredibly helpful. Vintage Mozart, Dark Mist, Abby. And so that whole group of people, Iris, they've all also shared my work. Put it on Instagram. We've had Clubhouse conversations with each of the communities. And so it's been also an amazing way to learn about the ways in which I think, again, one of the big differences with the NFT space is how supportive so many of the other artists are for each other.
Absolutely.
And that has been so generative and exciting for me, and also just getting to connect with so many amazing, brilliant creators in the space. So yeah, so that's kind of, it started with kind of that promotion, and then now it's also become like a community aspect that's still grounded in kind of the Black NFT and African NFT communities.
The community is very, very strong. And one of the wonderful things that I've seen, artists who have gone on to be very successful, even in a short period of time, and those who aren't, from a dollar perspective, quote unquote, overwhelming successes, have taken what they've earned and what they've learned and reseeded the community. So we are actually creating the recycling of dollars, and by dollars, I mean crypto, within our ecosystem. And it's a global system. This is exactly what it's supposed to look like when we think of collective work and cooperative economics. So that's really, really powerful and a testament to the support. Oh my gosh, I'm looking at my time. I have to lovingly return you back to your life. But it's been an absolute joy. I know that this is the first time, but not the last, where we speak. I want to give you the opportunity to share any final thoughts or words of wisdom of others who are looking to get into the space, particularly those who are historically disenfranchised or minoritized or othered in any way, and as a source of empowerment, what the opportunities are here, and then definitely any opportunity where people can learn more about you and your work.
Yeah, I think my big message to prospective artists that are interested in this space is the engagement with community. And I mentioned before, when I was thinking about entering the space, I reached out to artists, including Raven, Andre, connecting with the Black NFT community, going in Clubhouse groups. And so really people within the space I think many people are kind of scarred from physical art spaces, but people really want to help. And so if you go into these spaces and you ask questions, people are always really supportive and really helpful. And opportunities come from that in a really generative fashion, because again, through conversations I've had on Twitter, it led to my first show in the metaverse like a week ago with Maya. I'm having my first physical NFT exhibition in Dakar in September. Amazing. So it's like, I think, just again, through that community aspect. So I think I really encourage people to go on Twitter, Clubhouse, and connect with the groups, particularly Black NFT community, African NFT community, or whatever community is connected to their own identities. People are really supportive. And that is how we'll be able to also find spaces to promote your work and to share everything that you're doing and the ideas that you're generating. And so if people want to reach out to me, feel free to. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. They're all under my name, Mikel Owunna, one word.
Perfection. Mikel, it's been an absolute pleasure. I will see you back in those Twitter streets, and let's continue the conversation. I will continue to amplify your excellence, and I look forward to continuing to get to know you and growing with you. So thank you so much for spending this time with me on Tech Intersect. Wow, thanks again, Mikel, for such a rich, vibrant, and illuminating conversation about artistic and economic justice in the NFT space. Without meaningful empowerment in the crypto space, we may never realize the goal of abiding and transformative generational wealth for Black people in the new economy. But the time is now, because the future is now. Before we sign off, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this episode and this podcast with your networks. Follow me on social media and let me know what topics you'd like to hear more of and who you want to hear from. All right, that's all for this episode. Until next time, continue to shine.
Stay in touch with host Tanya Evans via your favorite social media. On Twitter at Tech Intersect and on Instagram via the handle Tech Intersect. This podcast has been produced by Stephanie Renee for Soul Sanctuary Incorporated.